here is OK. And here, so I'm gonna save. And what about parents? Let's quickly delete here. And again, admins and teachers can see the parents, but only admin can create, delete, or update. I'm gonna import. Let's check one more time. Update, delete. And new one. By the way, the table name will be parent. Here is correct. Let's check this one. Okay, this is correct. Okay. And let's fix here. Okay. And what about results? I'm gonna delete this. Only admin and teacher can update or delete the result. Admin or teacher. And here. Just like that. And here. Okay, let's write our role condition. After this params condition, I will say role conditions, switch case. We are going to check the role. If it's the teacher, let's see our table. As you can see, we have the exam or assignment here. So I will say query.or exam lesson teacher, and it's gonna be current user ID. And I will do the same thing for the assignment. Just like that. And if the user is a student, we are going to directly check the student ID. And it's going to be the current user ID. And finally, if the case is parent, query.student, and its parent ID will be the current user ID. Let's see the results. And we have just one assignment and the student name is 8. Let's check. Okay. We have here different class because it's a random generated data. Don't worry about here. And what else? We have the students. And only admin can delete or update the students. Role equals admin. And let's change this role. And I'm not gonna add here any additional condition because teacher can see all the students. And we are gonna do exactly the same thing for the teachers page, teachers list. Let's remove here and import. And there is only one more, and it's gonna be subjects. And I'm not gonna add here a condition because only admin can see this page. So we don't actually need here, but it can stay. It doesn't matter. And that's all, I think. This is how we create role-based route protection and data fetching. Right now we can add our own data, but before, let's take care of the home pages. Firstly, I want to fetch my admin data. To do that, I'm gonna log in as admin. And firstly, let's fetch all these user counts. I'm gonna close everything here, open my admin page. And if you remember, we have some user cards here. And since we don't have stuff, I'm gonna change this to admin, teacher, student, and parent. And inside those cards, we are gonna fetch our user counts. To do that, I will say async. And I'm not gonna say string, it's gonna be admin, teacher, student, or parent. So for each type, we are gonna fetch different data. For example, for the admin, we will say data await prisma.admin and count. Let's see. I'll open my terminal, and as you can see, we have 2 admins. But how we are gonna make here dynamic? We cannot use this just like that. So what we can do here is we can create an object map, let's say const model map, and it's gonna include admin. In this case, it's gonna be prisma.admin. Here is gonna be teacher, student, and parent. So right now I can use my model map and its type. And to prevent this error, let's write our type here. I will create a record, and the first element will be this type. So let's say type of type, and here is gonna be any. And right now I can use my data here, just like that. What about here? I will close them. And if you remember, inside the components, we have this count chart, but since we are using this animated chart, our component should be a client component, but we have to fetch the data. To do that, I'm gonna create a container here, count chart container. I'm gonna create my component. I will fetch my data here. So I will say async function. And after fetching data, I'm gonna pass this here. So let's get all this container here and paste. And inside, I'm gonna call my component count chart. It ends here. Let's cut this and paste here. Or actually, we can use this here. because we can change this size if we want to. Okay, right now I'm gonna get my data from the parent, and it's gonna include the boys and girls, and they are gonna be number. According to those numbers, we can update our data. Of course, I have to move this here. And the total number will be boys plus girls. Here is gonna be the girls number, and here is gonna be the boys number. So let's fetch our data and pass it here. Let's open the container. Firstly, I'm gonna import this image. And there's a warning here because we didn't pass the props. Let's fetch the data first. I'll say const data await Prisma. I will check the student, and I'm gonna be using here group by because we are gonna need only the number of the girls and boys. I'll say group by sex, and I'm gonna get the count. Inside our schema, we have only 2 items, so it's gonna group them by male and female, and it's gonna send the total number of each group. Let's see. Console log data. Of course, we should change our admin page. Instead of count chart, we are gonna be using count chart container. Let's remove this. Open our terminal, and as you can see, 25 female, 25 male. So let's send this. I'm gonna close here. Boys is gonna be, actually let's filter our data here. I'll say const boys data.find. For each item, we are gonna check the sex. If it's male, we are gonna take the count. If it doesn't exist, it's gonna be 0. I will do the same thing for the other one. And here is gonna be girls. And perfect. Let's change this number and the percentage. I will say boys and girls. And we are gonna need a calculation here. To do that, I'm gonna be using the math library. I will say round boys divided by the total number, which means boys plus girls. And if I multiply this by 100, it's gonna give me the percentage. We are using round because I just wanna see here a flat number. And if we have just 1 boy and 9 girls, the total number will be 10. 1 divided by 10 is gonna be 0.1. If I multiply this by 100, it's gonna be 10%. But in our case, the 50% will be boys, the other 50% will be girls. Let's copy this and paste here. And this time, here is gonna be girls. And of course, I'm gonna multiply here, not only here. So let's wrap this like that. And round will end here. Okay, I will do the same thing. Let's see. And perfect. 50% and 50%. So right now we can take care of this chart. Again, we are gonna fetch data. So let's create our container. I will come back, close everything here, open my attendance chart, and create one more component. Container. I will say async. We'll fetch our data here. But before, I'm gonna copy here and paste. Here is gonna be attendance chart. And I'm gonna close this div. And I will remove this one. And we are gonna get the data from the parent. And it's gonna be this data array that includes some objects, and each object includes the name, present, and absent. So let's see. Name will be a string, present, the number, and absent. And of course, it's gonna be an array. And after that, we are not gonna need this data anymore. Instead, we are gonna be using this data from the parent. Let's fetch our data. Firstly, I'm gonna import this and fetch data. I will say await prisma.attendance. I will say find many. And we are gonna need here a condition because in our application, we are gonna fetch the list only belong to this week. In this case, we are gonna need the date value, but there is something important here. Let me actually put this data back. I'm gonna change here for now. As you can see, it includes only current week. So if we are on the Monday, we are gonna see here only one item. If today is Friday, we are gonna see 5 items. In this case, we are gonna need the latest Monday. If we find this date, we can fetch data after this date. So firstly, I'll say const today, and it's gonna be new date, and const day of the week, it's gonna be today.getDay. It basically returns us the number representation of the date. For example, today is Thursday, the week starts from Sunday, so it's gonna be the item 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I say get day, this is gonna be 4. Let's see. I'm gonna comment this out, and here, open my admin page, and use my container here. In this case, we don't need this anymore. I will open my terminal, and as you can see, it's 4. So using this number, we can reach the previous Monday. So I will say const days since Monday, and I will say if day of the week equals 0, which is Sunday, the number will be 6, because 6th day before the Sunday will be Monday. But if it's not Sunday, if it's Tuesday, for example, the day of week will be 0, 1, 2, 2 minus 1 will be Monday, or 3 minus 2 will be Monday, or 4 minus 3 will be Monday. So I will say, if it's not Sunday, I can directly use day of week minus 1, and it's gonna give me the days since Monday. So using this value, we can reach the last Monday. So I will say const last Monday. Let's create a new date. We can pass here today, and I will say last Monday, set a new date, today.getDate minus days since Monday. Right now I can use it here. I will say where the date will be greater than the last Monday. And I will say select. We are just gonna need the date and present. But remember, in any case, we are gonna need all these items. So even if we are on the Thursday, we are gonna see the Friday data, and it's gonna be 0. So basically, we are gonna create 5 items for each day here. Let's create, and you are gonna understand better. Firstly, I will say console log data. Of course, it's empty right now because I'm recording this video a couple days after when I used the seed. Let's use it again. Firstly, I'm gonna be using npx prisma db push and force reset, and after npx prisma db seed. Let's refresh the page. And right now, we have some items here that includes the date and present. I cannot use directly group by date because each date is different. Even if they are the same day, hour, minute, or second will be different. So instead, let's create here our attendance map. And for each weekday, we are gonna use the data item which has the same day. Let me create const days of the week. So we are going to be using exactly the same names, the short names of the weekdays. And I will say const attendance map is going to be an object, and basically it's going to be exactly the same data here. But instead of this name here, I will use them just like that. Present, for now it's going to be 0, absent, and for the others, and for each item inside our data, we are going to update our map. So let's say data, actually, I'll say response data, because we are going to update it here. I'll say for each, we are going to get the date of the item, const item date. I'll say new date, pass here item.date. Again, I'm going to be using this day of week. And I will write my condition. If day of week bigger than 1, which is Monday, and smaller than 5, which is Friday. Actually, let's say equal because Monday is the day number 1. And in this condition, we are sure that we are in the day weeks from Monday to Friday. And using this object, I'm going to update my items. But there is something important here. The Monday is the item 0, but here the Monday is item 1. So I will say const day name, days of week, day of week -1. So today is Thursday, which means the number 4. If I say -1, we are gonna reach exactly the same name because 0, 1, 2, and 3. So let's update our map. I will say if item.present attendance map, the day name dot present will be plus equal 1. So we are going to increase this number. And otherwise, we are going to increase the absent. Of course, there's a warning here that because we don't have any type, let's come here. I'll say the key will be a string and the value will be present number, absent number. Okay, let's see it right now. Just like that. As you can see, we don't have from Monday to Wednesday because we are using this sheet. But once we start creating our own data, we are going to have all of them, so it will not look weird. Because in this case, we are going to have only Thursday here. But anyway, it works. So let's transform our map, because remember, it should be name, the day name, present and absent. But here, the name of the day is here. So I will say const data, days of the week dot map. I'll get each day, of course, not day, days. The name will be the day. Present will be attendance map, day dot present. And here is going to be absent. Of course, let's return them just like that and pass our data here. So let's remove this right now and change this data name. just like that. Okay, right now we can take care of this event list. And again, we are gonna fetch data, but our component is a client component because we can change our date. In this case, we can use a container. Let's close them. Open our component here. And I'm gonna create one more calendar container. I'll say async. We are gonna fetch our data here and pass this to event calendar. Let's copy here and paste, and this one. But actually, we are gonna need one more component because here we also have the event list, and whenever we change the date of this calendar, we are gonna list different events. So basically, we are gonna have a container, and inside we will have this client component and this server component. And when we change the data here, we can update our URL, and inside this list component, we can take date and fetch our data. So inside components, I'm gonna create event list. And I'm gonna use it here. And here is gonna be event calendar. Let's import this image. And inside this component, we will not have these lists. I'm gonna copy this and remove, and we are gonna return the calendar component. That comes from React Calendar. We don't need this anymore. And these data. And I'm gonna paste my list here. Of course, we don't have events, but we are gonna fetch. It can stay like that for now. And whenever we change our date, we are gonna update the URL. Remember how we are doing that? I'll say const router. That comes from use router hook. And I will create here a use effect. And whenever our date changes, that includes our date, we are going to update our URL using the router. So let's say push. The date will be the value. In this case, we are going to need here router. Actually, we can add here the type condition. So I will say value instance of a date. Okay, let's use this onChange here and the value. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna click here and the date is here. Of course, it looks a little bit ugly. If you want to, you can just do it like the month and the year. But anyway, it can stay like that. Basically, using this date, we are gonna fetch different events. So let's use it here. I will say date param. To get this, remember, we are using search params. And that includes the keys, which are strings, and the values are string or undefined. In our case, we are gonna need this date. I'm gonna get the date from search params and use it here. Let's open our component and get this as a prop, date param. It's gonna be a string or undefined. So let's get the date, const date. If there's a date param, I'm gonna transform this into a date because here is gonna be a string. I will paste it here. And if it doesn't exist, we are going to get the today's date. And using this date, we can fetch our data, const data, await Prisma, event table, I'll say find many, and I will write here my condition. If you remember, it includes the start time, and it's going to be greater than the beginning of this date and less than the end of this date. To do that, we are going to be using new date, and we are going to change the hours, and it's going to be the beginning of the date. And one more, and this time it's going to be less than new date, set hours, but this time the end of the day. Let's say 999. And right now we can map through our data here. We don't have to wrap this anymore. Just like that. Event ID, title, here is description, but there is something wrong here. We are going to be using start time, but we are going to get only hours, not the complete date. Remember how we are doing this? I'll say to local time string, you can write here any location. The hour will be 2-digit. The minute will be the same. And hour 12 will be false. So we are going to see only hour and minute. And there is something wrong here because it should be async. We are fetching data. And I will save here. Okay, let's open our admin page. And this time I'm going to change my container and pass here the search params. Just like that. Because remember, we can reach the search params only on the pages, not components. And since this is a page, we have to get these params here and pass it to our component. Let's see. All these events are here. If I click here, there will be no events. Because in our studio, all events belong to today because of the seed. Okay, it works. And finally, let's take care of the announcements. We don't need any container. We are not using client side. Let's open our component. I will say async. Const data, await, Prisma.announcement. I'll say find many. But we are gonna need here a condition because we can see all the general announcements, and also if we are the student, parent or teacher, we should see all the announcements belong to us. To do that, again, we are gonna need our role and user ID. I'll say const user ID and session claims. That comes from clerk auth. And I'm gonna get the role. Remember how we are doing this. Session claims dot metadata. And it includes a role that is a string. Let's get that role just like that. And for each user type, I'm gonna add different conditions. So let's say role conditions. If it's an admin, we will not have any condition. We can see all the announcements. If it's a teacher, let's remember our schema. As you can see, each announcement can include a class. Of course, it's optional. If you don't have any class, that means it's a general announcement. So I can write here a condition. I will say where or, and the first condition will be the class ID doesn't exist. And if there's a class ID, we are going to use our conditions. So I will say role conditions and our user role. Let's write our first condition. We are going to check the class and its lessons. And it's going to include our teacher ID. So I will say user ID. Two more. If it says student, this time we are going to check the class students. And it's going to include our ID. Of course, we are sure that it exists. And if it's a parent, again, we are going to check the students. And here is going to be parent ID. Okay, let's write our type here to prevent this error. Type of role conditions or empty object. And in our application, we can see here 3 announcements. If you want to, you can see all of them, but let's take 3 of them. So I will say take 3 items and order by, the date will be descending. So we are going to see the latest announcements. So using this data, you can map through each item here. But if you remember, we gave here different colors. And since we have only 3 items, let's use them like that. Data, the first item, and the title. I will copy this. Here is going to be description. Second item. And the third one, which is item number 2. What about those dates? I'm gonna format them. Remember how we are doing this. Format, I'm gonna add here the data dot date. Here is gonna be 0, 1, and 2. Let's see. And there's a problem here. Okay, there is no data, I think. By the way, we have to write a condition. If it exists, we don't have any. It's because of this admin condition, I think, because here is going to be an empty object. Actually, let's remove this. And I will copy this. And I will use spread and my condition here. If role doesn't equal admin, use these conditions. So if we are an admin, we are not going to have any condition. But if we are going to destructure this object. Just like that. Okay, so we finished our admin page. Let's take care of the teacher page. I'm gonna sign out and teacher. And as you can see, there is no announcement here because they don't belong any of our classes. Let's add here a general announcement. And let's copy this date paste here. We are not gonna have any class ID. I'm gonna save, refresh the page, and as you can see, it's here. Okay. If you want to, you can add here the event container, but it can stay like that. Let's take care of our schedule. I'm gonna come here, close everything, open my teacher page. And right now, instead of this big calendar, again, I'm gonna create a container because it can be the teacher's calendar or the student's calendar. For each user type, we are gonna fetch different data. So I will say big calendar container. I will say async. And let's call this container here. Remember, it includes the lessons, and in our schema, each lesson has a teacher ID, so we can use it directly. But if it's the student, we can use this student class ID. So basically, we are going to get two types. Let's open our big calendar container, and I will say type, and it can be either teacher ID or the class ID. And in any case, we are going to need the ID, and it's going to be a string or number, because if it's the teacher ID, it's going to be string. If it's the class ID, it's going to be number. So let's fetch our data here. Const data await Prisma dot lesson find many, and I'm gonna write my condition here, and I will say if the type is teacher ID will be ID. If it's not, the class ID will be ID. Of course, it's gonna be number, and here is gonna be string. So we can call our calendar component here, big calendar, and pass our data. Let's get this as a prop. But if you remember, let's check our temporary data. We are passing here the title, start and end dates. So we should pass exactly the same structure here. So instead of sending this data directly, let's format this first. So I will say const data response.map for each lesson insight. We are going to return the title, which is lesson name, start, which is the start time, and end time. Okay. In this case, it's going to be an object array, which includes the title, start, it's going to be a date, and end. Right now I can use it here. Okay, let's come here and get our user ID. User ID that comes from auth. And the type will be teacher ID, and the ID will be this user ID. I'm gonna remove this. Okay, let's see. It's not here because in our studio and lessons, as you can see, all these teachers' IDs are different. So let's change this one. Firstly, I'm gonna need my user ID. Remember, we did this before, but since we used the seed file again, we have to do it from scratch. I'm gonna copy. Let's open teachers. This is gonna be our teacher ID. Let's actually change the others. so we can see the schedule in the student page also. And finally, the parent. Okay, I'm gonna refresh the page, and as you can see, our lessons are here. Of course, the starting times and ending times are exactly the same. That's why we see them together here. But when we add our lessons, of course, we are gonna give different dates or hours. But anyway, it works. But there is something important here. Inside the lessons, the start time is today. That means if we check this page next week, we are not gonna see them here because the date will be different. To prevent this, before sending the data to our big calendar, we should change this date first. Hours and the day of the week will be the same, but we are gonna change the day and the month. So even if we visit in the future, we are gonna see exactly the same lessons in exactly the same place, but the date will be different. To do that, firstly, I'm gonna find the current week from Monday to Friday and apply all the previous lessons inside those dates. But if we visit page on Saturday or Sunday, the current week should be the next week. I know these date things are a little bit complicated, but let me show you how to do that. Firstly, I'm gonna create here a new file. Actually, we have utils here. We can make the calculation. Let's get the current work week. Work week. I'll say const today. New date. And again, I'm gonna get the day of the week. Remember how to do that. Today.getDay. And let's try to find the start of the week. Start of week. For now, I'll say today. And right now, I'm gonna update it. So I will say if today is Sunday, which means day of week equals 0. The start of the week will be next Monday. That means the next day. So I will say start of week dot set date, today's date plus 1. So I can do the same thing for the Saturday. If the number is 6, in this case, I'm gonna add 2. So again, we are gonna get the next Monday, and I'll say else start of week dot set date, today's date minus day of week minus 1. So in this case, if we are on the Monday, the day of week will be 1, 1 minus 1 will be 0. So we are not gonna change the date. It's gonna be still Monday. If we are on Tuesday, here is gonna be 2. 2 minus 1 will be 1. Tuesday minus 1 will be Monday again. So in any case, we are gonna find the Monday. And also, I'm gonna set the hour. Just like that. And using this Monday, we can also find the Friday. Const end of week. New date. Let's say start of week. We are gonna add 4 more days. Get date plus 4. So this is gonna be Friday. And again, I can set hour, but this time it's gonna be the end of the day. Okay, I'm writing them in a long way because I want you to understand. Of course, you can make it shorter, but I'm trying to do this step by step. And right now we have the start of the week and end of the week. Let's return them. just like that. And right now I'm going to create a new function. Let's say export const adjust schedule to current week. So we are going to get the lessons, which includes the title, start date, and the end date. And of course, it's going to be an array, and the output of this function will be exactly the same. But this time we are just going to change the date. Firstly, I'm going to get the start of the week and end of the week, current work week, and I'm going to return my lessons, but I'm going to make some changes for each item inside. I'll say lesson. Firstly, I'm going to find the lesson day of week. Lesson dot start date and get day. So in this case, here is Thursday, so it's going to be 4 here. And I'm going to find the difference between Monday, const days from Monday, and I will say if the lesson of week equals 0, the difference will be 6. If it's not, lesson day of week minus 1. Remember, we did this before. And right now I'm going to change the dates. Let's say adjust start date. For now, it's going to be a new date. Let's pass here start of week, and I'm going to change its date. Let's get the date, and I will say plus days from Monday. So let's calculate again. Lesson of the week. It's on Thursday, that means it's 4. Days from Monday will be 4 minus 1, which is 3. And I'm gonna add this number to start of the week, which is Monday plus 3. Again, it's gonna be Thursday. So in any case, we are gonna see our lessons. I can do the same thing for the end date. So let's create one more, and this is gonna be end date, and I'm gonna pass this here. So they are gonna be exactly the same date, but I'm gonna change the hours. This is the start date, this is the end date. So I will say adjust end date. Actually, let's say adjust. And I'm just gonna set hours. Lesson.end. And I'm gonna get the hours. So we are not gonna change anything. I can do the same thing for the minute and second. And that's all. Right now we can return our new date. Title, lesson.title. Start will be adjust start date. And here is going to be end. Let's add here a comma, and that's all. So let's use it in our component. I will say const schedule, adjust schedule to current week, and I'm going to pass here my data. Let's import. And let's use it here. Okay, there's an error because we are using Clerk server here, but our application is a client application. So instead of doing this here, let's do it in our calendar container. I'm gonna take this back. I will delete here. And perfect. but it includes the entire day. It should start from 2 p.m. That's because we didn't adjust our start date here. Here is going to be start hours, just like that. Okay, it works. By the way, we don't need this end of week. Let's directly return it like that. Okay, I'm gonna refresh my page. They are still here. So if we are the student, let's sign out. Student. And right now, we are gonna pass our class ID. Let's open the student page. It's the student list. Here is the student page. And I'm gonna call big calendar container and pass here my class name. So I will say async. I'll get my user ID first from Clark. And using this ID, I'm gonna fetch my class name. Prisma class. Of course, I should change this name. We cannot use class. I'll say class item. Find unique. And students. Some will be user ID. Of course, it should be find many. And it's going to return an array. Let's see. Okay, it's a promise because I forgot await here. Okay, as you can see, it's an array. We are gonna take the first item and its ID. So I will say type class ID, and the ID will be class item dot ID. Okay, I'm gonna close this terminal and this menu. Let's see. And perfect. And again, all these lessons are in exactly the same date, but anyway, it works. If you want to, you can change your seat. For each lesson, you can give different hours. Each lesson has exactly the same start time and end time. This is why we see them together. But anyway, so we finished our home pages. We finished our list pages. Right now, let's take care of the forms. As a student, we cannot create, update, or delete anything. So I'm gonna sign out and log in as admin. Firstly, I'm gonna start with the subject because it's easier. By the way, our buttons are not here. Let's close everything, open up subjects. Let me check this role. As you can see, it comes from library data. It should come from utils. I think we forgot this page. Okay, they are here. And actually, I don't have to say admin because only admins can see this page. But anyway, it can stay. Right now, when I click on this button, we are gonna see this form. And of course, we are using exactly the same form that we use for the teacher. Let's scroll down. As you can see, it's teacher, it's gonna be subject. But if you remember, inside the form model, we just have the student and the teacher forms. Let's open our menu and forms. As you can see, we have only two. So let's create one more. I will say subject form. And whenever we call subject here, we are going to import the subject form. Let's move this here. Of course, we are going to need the request type, create and update. And again, I want to warn you, if you didn't watch the previous video, here can be a little bit complicated for you because we created a bunch of nested components. And inside this form, we just handle the deleting operation. But when it comes to create or update, we are going to be using different forms. And also we are using these lazy loadings. Otherwise, it's going to load all of these forms. To prevent this, we are going to import them only when we need them. I can delete here. I'm going to add a comma. And of course, we don't have the type and data. Let's remember our teacher form. I will open up the teacher form. As you can see, type can be create or update. And if we are updating, we need to get the previous data so we can show them inside the inputs. So let's get exactly the same thing here. Just like that. So we are not going to have any warning. Okay, we have the lazy loading. By the way, for the list pages, you can show here a loading indicator first. So during the data fetching, instead of showing the blank page, blank white page, you can show a skeleton or a spinner or whatever it might be. To do that, inside the list, I'm going to create a new file and it's going to be loading.tsx. Let's just say loading. And I'm going to center this. Flex, item center, justify center. Of course, you can show here different things, but for now, it can stay like that. Let's open another page. As you can see, it was loading. Okay, this is how it works. So right now, let's create our subject form. I'm going to close this menu. And let's open up the teacher form. And if you remember, in our forms, we are using React hook form and Zod for the validation. And we are creating our schema here. And after this schema and inputs, we will create our form. And we are going to be using React hook form on submit event. And it's going to validate our inputs and send us this data. And since we learned them in the previous tutorial, I'm not going to explain it again. If you didn't watch the previous video, at least just watch this part. I'm not going to repeat again. Actually, copy everything here and paste. I'm going to change the name. It's going to be subject form. And I'm going to create my type here. Actually, instead of doing this here, let's cut this and create a new file inside the library. And I will say form validation schemas. I'm going to paste, let's say subject schema. I'm going to import Zod. And I'm going to paste it here. And it's going to be subject schema, but with the capital letter. Okay. Let's open our schema, Prisma schema, and let's see what we have. Inside the subject, as you can see, we have the name. And also, when we create any subject, we'll be able to choose the existing teachers. Actually, let's do without this first. We are just going to have the name input. It's going to be really easy. After understanding how it works, we are going to fetch the teachers and add them as inputs. I'm going to change here. We'll just have the name. I will not give maximum. Let's say minimum 1 and subject name is required. And that's all. Let's export them and use inside our form. We don't need this anymore. I'm gonna paste my subject schema here and import and Zod schema here. If you want to, you can change the names. You can say subject inputs, but I prefer using them like that. And let's change this. Title is gonna be create a new subject. But remember, the type can be update also. So let's write here a condition. I'll say if type equals create, we are gonna write here create a new subject. If not, let's say update the subject. And inside, we are just gonna have one input. Let's delete here all these items. And this is gonna be subject name. Here is gonna be name and name. Let's see, I'm gonna click, and as you can see, our form is here. Let's try. I'm gonna click. As you can see, subject name is required because minimum 1. And if I say test and create, there is no warning. Let's open our terminal. Click here, and as you can see, name is test. Right now, we can send it to our server and save it inside the database using Prisma. To do that, we are going to be using Next.js server actions. So let's come back. Inside the library, I'm going to create a new file, server actions, or directly let's say actions. To use server actions, you should add here the use server directive. So everything inside this file will be running on the server. And we will do all the data mutations inside this file. It can be create, update, and delete requests. So let's create our first action. I'll say export const create subject. It's going to be an async function. And we are going to get the data, which is a form data. And let's say console log data in the server or server action. Let's open our terminal and let's use this action inside our form. But of course, we are using React hook form here. So I'm going to call my action just like that. Let's import. In this case, instead of form data, we should get our subject schema because after the validation, it's going to send this validated data. So let's come back and I will say subject schema. I will save. Let's create again. And as you can see, it's here. Of course, it's an object, and this is how it looks in the server terminal. But if I say data.name, we can see it here. This is how server actions work. Right now, we can get this name and add it to our database. So I will say try catch. I will say console log, and let's say await Prisma subject table and create method, and inside we are gonna pass our new data, and it's gonna be data.name. As you can see, thanks to validation, we don't have to validate them again and again, and we don't have any TypeScript error because we're sure that our name exists here. Okay, and after adding this new item, we can revalidate our path. So it's gonna return the fresh data. I will say revalidate path, that comes from next cache. And I'm gonna write the path name, which is list subjects. Let's see. I will say first subject. I will create, and as you can see, it added here one more page. Let's see. I'm gonna open, and it's here. Let's create one more. I will create, and it's immediately here. But if we have any problem, let's write here subjects. Let's write something and create. And as you can see, we don't have any answer. And even if it's successful, we don't know that it's successful or not. But how we are gonna keep track of our form state? It's really easy. Let's take this back, open our form, close this menu. And right now, we are gonna be using use form state hook. If you check the official documentation of Next.js, in the server actions section, you are gonna see this use form state hook section. After React 19, it's gonna be use action state, but since we are using Next.js 14, we are gonna be using use form state. Actually, let me write here. After React 19, it will be use action state. But for now, we are gonna be using use form state hook. Let me import. It comes from React DOM. Here. By the way, we don't need this image. And let me explain how it works. We have a form here, and whenever we click on this sign up button, it's gonna call this action. Before use form state, we were calling our form action directly, remember? But in this case, instead of calling this action directly, we are gonna call this form action. And we are gonna pass our actual action here, which is create subject. And inside this form state, you can store any state you want. It can be a number, string, whatever you want to return. Let's say we want to return 2 items, success, which is false at the beginning, and error state, and again, false at the beginning. So whenever we run our form action, it's gonna call our create subject action. We are gonna add this subject to database. If there's an error, we are gonna change our state, like success is gonna be false, but error will be true. I will say return. But if everything is okay, if it's successful, the success will be true and the error will be false. And to use this state inside our action, we have to define this here. So I will say current state, and it's gonna be success, boolean, and error. Actually, let's create our type here. Just like that. And I'm gonna use it here. Okay. Right now, if there is any error, we can show it somewhere here. And also, you don't have to write success and error boolean. You can also send the message, whatever you want. I'm just showing you how to use server actions. I'm gonna save, and I'll say if state dot error, create here a span, and let's say something went wrong. As I said, you can store your error message and show it here. Let's give a class name. It's gonna be red, just like that. And let's make this mistake again. I'm gonna try to add something and create. And as you can see, something went wrong. And if it's successful, we can show here a notification. To do that, we are gonna be using a library called React Toastify. As you can see, we can show all these colorful notifications. Let's install. I will open my terminal, npm install react Tostify. And after that, we are gonna need this container. And whenever we call this function, it's gonna show our notification. Of course, you can change the position. Let's copy this, close here, open our layout. And after this children, I'm gonna add my container. I'm not using inside this form because it's gonna be global. We will be able to use it in any page or component. By the way, let's import this CSS. Just like that. And I'm gonna change the position. I want to see it on the bottom right. As you can see, there are many options here. You can also change the theme. By default, it's white. I'm gonna change it to dark. And right now we can use it. I'm gonna close here. And inside my subject form, I'm gonna create a use effect here. Use effect. And I will say, whenever state changes, fire this use effect. And if the state.success, call the toast function and write here your message. And remember, again, we have two types. For each type, we are going to return different text. So I will say subject has been, and I'm going to write my condition here. If type equals create, here is going to be created. If not, updated. Just like that. Let's see. Right now, I'm gonna remove this mistake. Open my subject form here. Test and create. Okay, it's not here. Because if you are using revalidate and trying to return anything, it gives this weird reaction. Let's comment this out. Test again. I'll create, and as you can see, it's here. If you check the documentation, you are going to see that there is a problem with the client-side cache, but they say it will be updated in the future. So to prevent this bug, instead of revalidate path, let's use useRudder hook and refresh our path manually. So I will say const rudder useRudder hook. That comes from next navigation. Don't use rudder. And if it's successful, I will say rudder.refresh. We can also close this model if it's successful. As you can see, by the way, our subject is here. And if it's successful, I'm going to close this model. If you remember, inside the form model, we have this open state, and we can change the state using this button, but also I want to change it after the successful action. To do that, let's pass this to our form. Just like that. And let's write it here. Let's see its type. As you can see, dispatch set state action and boolean. Let's copy this and paste here. I will import them. That comes from React. And this is also. And let's use this here. Of course, it's at the beginning here. And let's change the order here. Okay. Of course, there's a warning because it's not in our form. I will add it here. Again, this type. Just like that. And if it's successful, I will say set open will be false. Let's see again. Last one. I will create and perfect. This is how it works. So what about the update? When I click on this button, as you can see, our previous text is here because inside our input field, we are using data.name. Right now, when I click on this button, we are going to call a different action. Let's come here and create one more. It's going to be update subject. In this case, we are going to be using the update method. I will write my condition. The ID will be data.id. But if you remember, in our validation, we don't have the ID. Let's add. If it's the update mode, we are going to be using this ID, which is a number, and it's going to be optional. But if you are using a primitive type, except for string, I highly recommend you use here chars, because when you parse this object, it's going to return a string. To prevent this, we are using this field here. Okay, so I will come back. As you can see, there is no error anymore. Again, it's going to be successful. If there is an error, here is going to be true. Let's try. I will say updated. And perfect. And finally, I'm going to create one more action. And it's going to be delete subject. In this case, Prisma subject delete, and we are going to pass our ID here. Let's remove this, and let's remember our form model. Here, if the type is delete, we are using this form. Right now, let's do exactly the same thing here. I'll say const state form action, use form state hook. We are going to call delete subject and the initial state. Success false, error false. And again, if it's successful, we are going to be using React Router and use effect. And let's say subject has been deleted. Of course, this action will be dynamic. If it's teacher, it's going to be delete teacher. If it's student, delete student. So let's create here our delete action map. I'm going to use it here. And if it's subject, we are going to call delete subject. And let's write for the others. Okay, for each table, we are going to return different delete action, but we have only one, so they can stay like that for now. So I will come here and I will say delete action map and the table name here. So for subject, it's going to call this function. So let's call it here. And let's add our input here. It can be a text or a number, because for the users it's going to be a string, and for the others it's going to be number. Let's give the name ID, and value will be the ID, and I will say hidden. So we are not going to see this input. And since it can be text or number, let's say const ID data dot get ID as string. Of course, it's not going to be subject schema anymore. It's going to be form data. And I will say parse integer and the ID. Let's see. I will click here and delete, and perfect. It's gone. But what about other data? As you can see, we have the teachers field. So when I click on this button, we should also be able to choose teachers. There will be maximum 20 teachers, so we can show them here. If you have more items like students, parents, I don't recommend you to fetch them, but in this situation, for teachers, we are gonna fetch and show here. And since it's a client component, let's create a container. So I will come here, open my menu, and I will say form container. We are gonna get exactly the same types because right now, instead of form model, we are gonna be using form container. Let's take them. Just like that. Actually, we are using exactly the same type. So let's export. I will say export type, form container props. And I'm gonna paste it here. Let's use it. And here. And right now I'm gonna call my form model. I'm gonna pass everything here. But also we are gonna fetch here the related data and pass here. For example, for the subject, we are gonna fetch all the teachers. By the way, there is something wrong here because I didn't save. Okay, let's fetch all the teachers and pass it to our model. So I will say async. And firstly, I'll create related data. It's gonna be empty. And for each table, we are gonna have different related data. And if the type is delete, we don't have to fetch anything. So let's say if type doesn't equal delete, I'm gonna be using switch case, get the table. And if it's subject, we are gonna fetch the teachers. Prisma, teacher, find mini. And we are just gonna need the teacher ID, the teacher name, and surname. Let's update our data. I will say teachers will be subject teachers. So let's pass this here, just like that, and get our related data here. Just like that. In this case, I'm gonna extend this type. Related data will be any, because we don't know which tables we are gonna fetch. Okay, let's pass this to our forms. Just like that. And I'm gonna get them here. And let's paste them here. Let's open our form. It's here. And update our types. Just like that. Let's update our subject type. I will open form validation schema. And I'm gonna add here teachers. It's gonna be an array which includes strings. Because we are gonna add here our teacher IDs. So let's come here and add here one more input, but it's gonna be select. By the way, we don't have our ID here. Of course, we didn't add this here. Okay, there is no error. We have warnings here because in the teacher and student form, we don't have those types. We are gonna update them. Let's click here. If I update, nothing is happening because in our action, we don't have the ID. So let's create one more here. And I will say if there is a data, because that means we are in the update mode. In this case, here is going to be ID. Just like that. Actually, it can be hidden. Let's update our type. Hidden will be Boolean. And if it's hidden, I'm going to change my class name. I will say if it's hidden, it's going to be class name hidden, which means display none. If it's not, it's going to be Flexbox. And let's say optional, so we don't have to pass. Let's move this here. And save here. Okay. If I say 2, okay, it's still not updated because we didn't use this action name in our form. I will come here and I will write a condition. I will say if type equals create, call this function. If not, update subject function. Let's also add our teachers. After this data, we are going to be using select. Let's remember from the teacher form. If you remember, we were adding our selects like this. Let's copy this and paste. I'm going to change the title, teachers, select element, and we can choose multiple teachers. I'm going to change these names. And we are going to be using this related data, which includes our teachers. Let's actually destructure this. And for each teacher, we are going to return an option. Let's write our type here. It includes ID, name, and surname. Let's use the name and surname here. Teacher.name space teacher.surname. And the value will be teacher ID. And also we are going to need here our unique key, teacher.id. And let's use it in our action. Firstly, when we create a new subject, we are going to pass here teachers. And I will say connect data.teachers. Remember, it includes our teacher IDs. And for each teacher ID, the ID will be teacher ID. Let's open our schema again. inside subject, we have the teachers, and inside this array, we are going to add every single teacher using this ID. And when it comes to updating, I will say teachers, but this time I will say set, because if I choose a different teacher here, it's going to delete the previous ones and set a new one here. So I will say data teachers map for each ID. The ID will be teacher ID. Let's see. I'm going to update here. Choose this teacher and this one and update. And they are here. Okay, awesome. Let's create a new one. I'm going to choose this one, create, and perfect. I can also delete. Okay. This is how we are using server actions and updating our data. So let's do the same thing for the class. Let's see first. As you can see, each class has a name, capacity, and also we can fetch all the teachers again and pass here the teacher ID and all the grades and pass here the grade ID. And for the update, again, we are going to need this ID. So let's create our schema. I'll say class schema. It's going to be an ID. Again, name, capacity. It's going to be a number. Let's change this message. Two more. I'm going to delete this. Here is going to be grade ID. And here is going to be supervisor ID. Here is going to be number. Here is going to be string because it's a user. Let's say optional, but grade will be required. As you can see, it's optional, but this is required. Okay. Let's create our actions. Here is going to be create class. We are going to get the class schema. We are going to create a new class. Let's remove here for now. Update class. Again, I'm going to remove this and delete class. We are going to get the form data and delete this class. We are not going to use here, but let's change. For the future, you can use them. Okay, so let's open our class list and change our form models. Instead, we are going to be using form container. Let me close this menu, open our form container, and I'm going to add one more case here, and it's going to be class. If it's class, we are going to need class grades. We are going to get the ID and level. And also, we are going to need the teachers. Let's say class teachers. Name and surname. Let's pass them here. Teachers will be class teachers. And the grades will be class grades. Okay. Let's open our model and create one more item here. By the way, let's comment them out for now. I will say class form. Of course, we don't have yet. Let's create. I will open my menu inside forms. Let's copy this and paste again. I'm going to change the name, class form, and change this component name. Okay, right now I can use it here. Let's import. We'll pass all this data, and also I'm going to add here my delete action, and it's going to be delete class, just like that. Okay. I'm going to import class form, because remember, we shouldn't import this. We are using lazy loading. And that's all, I think. Let's come here. Everything is going to be the same. I'm going to change here. Create class. Update class. Of course, there is an error here that because we are not collecting all our data, here is going to be class name. Let's update here. And I'll create one more. Here is going to be capacity. There's a problem because we didn't import our type. Here is going to be class schema and the Zod schema, just like that. And I will say supervisor. This time it's not going to be multiple. Each class can have only one supervisor. Let's say supervisor ID, and here let's get the data from the related data. Remember, we pass here teachers and grades. For each teacher, again, we are going to be using the name and surname, and one more. And this is going to be the grade. Grade ID, grades, for each grade, ID will be number, and the level will be a number. Let's pass here our grade and its key, and we are going to be using the grade level here. Let's update here. And let's see. I'm going to open my class list. Click here. And as you can see, all our items are here. You can choose any grade, any teacher here. Let's say 20. I will say 4B. I will create. And there's something wrong here. Because here is supervisor ID. Let's try it again. Grade 3. I'm gonna create. Something went wrong. Let's open our action. Oh, because we didn't pass any data, let's pass our data directly. We are not going to have any additional information. I will save, create, and it's here. Okay. What about delete? Let's see. We get the ID and delete the class. It's a number. Let's see. I'm going to click. And perfect. Right now, we can update our class. The ID will be data ID, and I will pass my data again. But inside this form, I'm gonna also add selected. So I will say selected if there is data and grade ID equals data.grade ID. I will do the same thing for the teacher. Here, in this case, teacher ID will be data.supervisor ID. So right now, let's create an item. Teacher 6, grade 2, I'm gonna create. And if I try to update, you are gonna see that teacher 6 and grade 2 is still here. Let's update. And perfect. So after creating a single form, the others are easier. You are gonna do exactly the same thing. You are gonna create your schema, your actions. You'll change your list component. So let's do one more and you are gonna understand better. Let's take care of the teachers, for example. As you can see, we have the subjects. So we can send this data as a related data. So when we create a new teacher, we can show the subject list. So we can choose any of them. Okay. Firstly, I'm gonna open up teacher form, close this menu. Let's cut this and paste here. We are gonna need the ID for updating the teacher. But it's gonna be optional because when we create, we don't need that. We'll have the username, password, name, surname. Let's change them. And email is gonna be optional. But since we are using a validation here, it's not gonna work. To prevent this, I'll say or z.literal and empty string. That basically means it can be an empty string. If it's not, it has to be a correct email. Here is gonna be optional. Here is gonna be the same. We'll have the blood type, birthday. But remember, if you are using number, boolean, or date, you should use here chars. Let's make them capital. And image is also optional. Let's open our schema. As you can see, it's optional. And also, I'm gonna remove this instance of file because we are gonna be using Cloudinary widget. And when we upload our image, it's gonna directly return us the image URL, which is a string. And I will say optional. It can be empty. And finally, let's add here our subjects. It will be an array which includes strings. And again, it's going to be optional. And basically inside this array, we are going to store our subject IDs. Let's change this name. Teacher schema. I'm going to pass this here and let's change this name. Just like that. Of course, I'm going to export them. Let's take care of our actions. Create teacher. It's going to be teacher schema. Update teacher. Let's change here. After we are gonna take care of this data because we should also add our subjects, but it can stay like that for now. And delete teacher. form data, and delete this teacher. Okay. Right now, let's open our teachers list, and after I'm gonna update my form. Teachers. I'm gonna select those form models, and they are gonna be form container. Teacher create and teacher delete. We don't have the update because we already have the single teacher page. I'm gonna save and open this container. And one more case here, and it's gonna be teacher. If it's a teacher, we are gonna fetch our subjects, teacher subjects, await Prisma subject, find mini. We are gonna need this ID and the subject name. We don't need anything else. Let's say subjects, teacher subjects. Okay, so let's open our model right now. If you remember, we commented this out. Let's open again. We already imported this here. And let's change our type. We are going to add this related data, teacher form. And also I will say set open. Dispatch, set state action, and its type, Boolean. Let's change here. It's going to be teacher schema and teacher dot schema. And let's see here, it's not saved. And again, I forgot to add this here. The order is different. Okay. So right now we are going to do exactly the same thing. We will create our use form state hook. And if it's successful, we are going to refresh the page. Let's copy this and paste here. I'm going to import use form state. If it's create, we are going to call create teacher action. If it's not, update teacher action. I'm going to call this use rather hook, use effects, and toast. And let's say teacher has been created or updated. Let's write here a condition. If type is create a new teacher. If not, update the teacher. Remember, inside related data, we have the subjects. We are going to have the username, email, password. Here is going to be name. Here is going to be surname, phone, address, blood type, birthday, and I'm going to add here one more select. And it's going to be subjects. That means we can choose multiple items. Let's change here. And I'm going to get my subjects array. For each subject, we are going to return an option. Of course, it will be subject and its type, which includes the ID and the name. And let's wrap this just like that. And the value will be subject ID. And here is going to be the name. Also, we need a unique key. Again, ID. I'm gonna save. Let's close here, the others. And in the actions, I'm gonna add this function here. And let's see. Okay, there is something wrong with the list page. Because I'm importing twice, let's remove this. And all these subjects are here. We can choose multiple one. If I say create, we'll see all these required fields. By the way, it shouldn't be required. Image is optional, but in our form, as you can see, we are using this image component. But I'm gonna remove this because we are gonna be using Cloudinary Next.js widget. Let's open the documentation and install this library. After that, inside the env file, we are gonna add our cloud name. If you open your dashboard, you are gonna see here your cloud name. You can change here. So let's open the env file, close this terminal, and next public Cloudinary cloud name will be llama-dev. And also we are gonna add here our API key. Let's create one more, and this is gonna be API key. Okay, so let's see how to use it. I'm gonna open up the upload widget. And we are gonna import this widget and use it just like that. And inside you can give any button or any HTML element. So again, I'm gonna be using exactly the same thing here. So it can stay for now. I'm gonna paste it. Import. And let's take this label and paste it here. If you want to, you can change here. It can be a div. Because there is no input, I can delete here. And right now, I don't need this. Let's see. I'm gonna click. And our widget is here. When I click on this widget, nothing is happening because we didn't pass here our upload preset. Let's come back. And on the dashboard, I'm gonna open up upload presets. As you can see, those are our previous applications. I will just say school. And you can add here any folder name. So when you upload any image, they are gonna be stored in this folder. I will save and let's use it here. And also, as you can see, we are not using this function. When we click on this button, we should open our widget. So I will say on click, open this widget. Okay, right now it's gonna open. Let's see, and perfect. We can choose any image, but after the successful uploading, we should return our image URL. Let's see what's inside. And it returns the result. And let's see what's inside. Let's open our console and try to upload. And as you can see, our image is here and inside the info. And this is our image URL. So we can use it. To do that, I'm gonna store my image inside a store. So let's come here and say image set image. Use state hook and its type will be any. And whenever our upload is successful, we are gonna set our image. result.info. And also after uploading, we can close our widget. To do that, I'm gonna take result and also widget, and I'm gonna close it here. Let's see. I will click, upload this image, and it's gone. If you want to, you can show your image here. Just create an image tag and use your image URL. And it can stay like that. Right now, I'm gonna open my actions. And firstly, I'm gonna create a user on the Clerk server. And after that, we are gonna get our user ID and send it to our database. To do that, we can use the same block. I'll say const user await Clerk client that comes from Clerk Next.js server. And I will say users and create user function. And inside we can pass our username, which is data.username. We can pass the password, first name, and last name. But in our database, it's name and surname. By the way, this N should be capital. And after creating this user, we can send it to Prisma. So inside the data, the user ID will be user.id. I will write my other fields, data.username, name, surname, email, phone, address, image, blood type, sex, birthday, and finally subjects. But remember, we are storing the subject IDs inside this array. So I will say subjects, connect, and for each item inside this array, we are gonna return the ID and the subject ID. By the way, here is gonna be a string. In this case, we should transform this to an integer. So I will say parse int and subject ID. By the way, there is something wrong here. Of course, these items can be undefined. So I will say null. Okay. Let's open our schema. It's actually required. And let's open our Zod schema. And here is going to be not optional. Right now there is something wrong here because it doesn't exist in our schema, as you can see. Let's add. I'll say birthday. And it's going to be a date time. I will do the same thing for the students, just like that. In this case, I will update my seed. You don't have to do that because when you open my GitHub repository, you are going to see the updated version. But for now, I'll say student will be 10 years old and teachers will be 30 years old. Just like that. Of course, there is a warning because we didn't apply the changes. Remember how we are doing this. npx prisma migrate dev. I will say yes. Add birthday. And it's ready. Let's see right now. Okay, I'm gonna save. Let's see our users here. We have only 4 users. I will say user, any password here, doesn't matter. John Doe. I'll add the address. Blood type, birthday, let's say 3 days ago. I'm gonna create, and there's something wrong here. Let's check. As you can see, the value should be capital. And let's write here our error. Let's remember how we were doing this. Subject form. And if there is a state error, we are going to show it here. Just like that. Okay. We'll call create teacher, but our image is here. We are not using that. So I will say add everything inside the data. Additionally, if there is an image, use its secure URL. Let's try. Let's say Jane. Any password here. Jane Doe. I'll give address, blood type, birthday, any subject here, and let's upload an image. I will create, and there is a problem. Let's open our terminal. There is something wrong with birthday. It looks okay. Inside the validation, we have our birthday here. Maybe it's a caching problem. Let's remove .next.js and start our application again. I will refresh this page. And let's try to create again. And it's successful. Our teacher is here. It was a caching problem. What about update? We can see this single teacher page, and I'm gonna add here the update button. I remember we did this, but let's open our single teacher page. I will close this terminal and menu. Okay, we didn't even fetch the single teacher. To do that, we are going to be using this param. So I will say param. Of course, it's going to be an async function. Let's write our type. Of course, it's going to be params, not param. And that includes our ID, which is a string. We can use this ID because inside the app directory, our dynamic route is ID. It has to be the same. And after getting our user ID, let's fetch this single teacher. I'll say const teacher await prisma.teacher. I'll say find unique because we are going to fetch only one teacher. And I will say where the ID will be our params ID. Of course, I can write here my type. By the way, let's get this ID. And of course, it can be also null. And I will say, if there is no teacher, return not found. That comes from next navigation. So we are going to see here the not found page. And if we have the teacher, we can use it here. Firstly, I will say teacher.image, and if it doesn't exist, use no avatar PNG. Here is going to be the name and surname. Here is our form model. By the way, if we are an admin, we can update this teacher. But of course, here is going to be form container. And instead of this data, I can send teacher. And also, we are going to be using our user role, not this temporary data. Let's remove here and here. And I'm going to import role from library and utils. We don't have any description. It can stay like that. I'll say teacher.blood type. Here is going to be the birthday. Remember how we are using our dates. Let me just copy and paste. Here is going to be the email. And if it doesn't exist, it's going to be just dash. Because remember, it's optional. And here is also phone or dash. And for the teacher, we are not going to have any attendance. It's specific for the students, but I don't know what we can put here. It can stay like that for now. And here we have some counts. This is going to be the subjects, lessons, and class numbers. So let's fetch them also. So I will say include count, and we are going to select subjects, lessons, and classes. In this case, I can change my type. It's going to be teacher. And also, we are going to add here the count, which includes subjects, lessons, and classes. Okay, let's use them here. Here is going to be teacher.count.subjects. Here is going to be lessons and classes. Okay, there is something wrong with this role. I think it was not a good idea to use this inside utils. We have a problem all the time, but it's a server component. We shouldn't have any problem. Let's copy this. We don't need this user ID. I'm gonna comment this out. Oh, we don't have any problem right now. We don't need this user ID. Okay, we have all the information here. There is no lesson or class. We created just one branch with this username, And when I click here, you can see that all our information is here. But there is no birthday. Let's open our teacher form. Find the birthday. As you can see, the default value is birthday, but I should transform this, otherwise it's not going to be visible here. And as you can see, it's here. Because in original one, there are also hours, minutes, and seconds, but we need only the month, the day, and the year. This is why we are transforming. And when we update the teacher, we don't have to update the password. So I will say optional. And using this ID, we can update the teacher. Let's see if our ID is here or not. Okay, we didn't add. Remember how we are doing this. If there is a data, that means we are in the update mode, so we can show our ID here. Of course, it's going to be hidden. We are not going to see that. Just like that. And after, we can update our teacher. So we are going to do exactly the same thing here. So I will say Clark client users and update user. And we have to pass here which user we want to update, and it's going to be data.id. By the way, we can write here a condition. If there is no data ID, we are going to return the error. I will add a comma. And I will say teacher update. We are going to pass here our condition, which is data.id. And we don't need this. Let's save and see. I'll say task2. I'm going to change the name, last name. Let's add one more subject. I'm going to update. Okay, it still asks for password. That's because we added here the minimum character. So what I can do, I can use exactly the same thing. It can be empty. And in my action, I will add here a condition. I will say if data.password is not empty, the password will be data.password. Let's see right now. I'm gonna update. Something went wrong. Okay, it still asks for the password because I didn't add this optional. And also, I didn't do exactly the same thing for the clerk. And as you can see, our user is updated. We have two branches. We actually updated the username. Let's update this first name and last name. Let's add one subject. And perfect. But we have three branches. That's because instead of setting new subjects and deleting the previous ones, we used connect. So I will say set. Right now, if I add only one subject, as you can see, it updates. Okay. What about deleting our teacher? As you can see, it uses parse int. It's going to be directly string. Let's try. I'm going to click and delete, and it's gone. Okay. This is how we are adding, updating, and deleting teachers. Let's do the same thing for the students, and you are going to understand better. Firstly, I'm going to fetch data for the single student. It's going to be similar. we are gonna take the params, fetch our student. Let's copy here and open up the student page. I'm gonna paste it here. And the type will be student. And additionally, we are gonna need our class. And inside the class, we have the lessons. Let's import this. And instead of count, we are gonna directly add the class. I'm gonna import Prisma. Here is gonna be student. And I will say include class. If there is no student, we are gonna return not found. We are not using count here, that's because they all are related to class. If we fetch only class, we can reach the grade and the lessons. Let's add our information here. Student.image or no avatar. Here is going to be name, surname. Blood type. Here is going to be the birthday. Again, I'm going to copy paste my date here. Email or empty. Phone or empty. And let's update them. I'm gonna get the first character of the class name, student.class.name char add 0. Here is gonna be student class. Oh, we don't have lessons here. Let's change here. It's gonna be the name. So we have to get the lessons count. To do that, I'll say include count. Lessons will be true. So let's add this here. In this case, it's gonna be class and also count, which includes lessons. Of course, here is gonna be select. Okay, right now we can use our count here. Just like that. By the way, oh, I removed this return by mistake. Perfect. What about this attendance? We can also fetch this inside this page. But we are already using nested query here. If you want to, let's create a new component. And also I can show you how to use suspense. So after loading the student information, we can show here the loading indicator. And after fetching, it's gonna show this percentage here. So let's come here. Inside the components, I'll say student attendance card. We are going to fetch our data here. And let's use this component here. I'm going to be using suspense block. Paste my component here. And when it's loading, we are going to be showing this text. Again, you can show here something different. I'm gonna copy this and paste here. And also I'm gonna need the student ID. The ID will be student.id. Let's take this as a prop. It's going to be a string. So I will say attendance await Prisma dot attendance find mini. Let's import this. And inside I will write my condition. And the student ID will be our student ID. And also, we are not going to fetch all the attendance. The date should be greater than the last year. To do that, let's use new date, get full year, and the last year. And after that, we are just going to need the percentage. So let's say const total days is going to be the attendance length. And I'm going to find the present days, the days the student has been present. So I will say attendance filter. For each day, we are going to return the days if they are present, and I'm going to take the length. And finally, I can find my percentage. Present days divided by total days multiplied by 100. Let's use it here. As you can see, it's 100%. And also let's update our schedule. If you remember, we have the big calendar container, and we have to pass here either the teacher ID or class ID. Since we have the class ID, let's say type class ID, and the class ID will be student.class.id. I can do the same thing for the teacher page. Single teacher page. And this time, it's gonna be the teacher ID. By the way, let's import. And the ID will be teacher.id. Okay, our lessons are here. So what about students page? Again, I'm gonna change my form model. They are gonna be form container. After, we will add our actions and create our form. It will be exactly the same thing. So let's open our students page. By the way, I want to remove this. I decided that I'm not gonna use it. It gives error. Instead, let's comment this out and paste it here. Okay. And here is gonna be form container, student delete, and student create. And we have to be an admin. Okay, let's create our actions quickly. I will just copy here. And let's paste. Delete student. Update and create. Let's create our schema. I will duplicate this. It's going to be student schema. I will pass it here and change my input type just like that. Again, we are going to have the ID, username, password, name, surname, all these data. But also, when we add a new student, we can get the grade ID, class ID, and the parent ID. So I'm going to remove here. And it's going to be grade ID. It's going to be a number. Let's say minimum 1. And if it doesn't exist, we are going to return this message. Grade is required. Let's do the others. Here is going to be a string. Parent is required, but we are not going to fetch every single parent and show it on our form. Instead, we are going to directly pass our parent ID. Otherwise, the calculation will be expensive. If we have thousands of parents, we shouldn't be able to see them on our form. But we can fetch the grade and class because we are going to have just, 10 or 20 classes. And maximum 6 grades. I'm going to save and let's use them here. Firstly, we are going to create a clerk client. But before, I want to check my class capacity. If there's a space, we can create this student. Otherwise, we have to pass a different class. So let's say const class item await prisma.class. I'll say find unique. And the ID should be the data.class ID that comes from our form. Let's actually move this inside the try. And also it should include the student's number, because if the capacity is 10 and if there are 8 students inside this class, that means we have 2 more space. So we should calculate it. So I'll say include count, and I'm going to select students. Let's write our condition here. I'll say if there's a data item and its capacity equals data item count and students, that means we don't have any space anymore, so we can return our error. Just like that. And if we have a space, we can add our user, and here is going to be new student, and instead of subjects, we are going to have the grade ID, class ID, and the parent ID. And for the update, it's going to be exactly the same. Let's copy them and paste here. Of course, we didn't add our schema, student schema. And finally, we can delete our student. And one more thing here, we should also delete the student from the clerk server. So I will say await clerk client users, delete user, and I'm going to pass here my ID. Just like that. Let's do the same thing for the teacher. I forgot that. Firstly, we are going to delete from the clerk and after our database. Okay, so let's open our form container. I'm going to add one more case here. If it's the student, we are going to add the grades and classes. grades. We'll get the ID and level. Of course, grade, not grades. And also, we are going to fetch the classes. And also, we are going to need the student number because we are going to show the empty space. So let's say include count, select, and students. Let's pass them here. Classes will be student classes, and grades will be student grades. Okay, let's open our form model, change here, delete student. We already have our form here. Let's get this back. Also, we are going to need the related data, just like this, and I'm going to move this here. Let's open our form. Actually, let's take everything from the teacher form, so it's going to be easier. I will copy and paste here. I'm just going to change the component name, student form. Let's see our model. As you can see, there is no error anymore. And by the way, when we delete our items, here is going to be the table name. And let's see what we are going to have. I'm going to close this menu. I'm going to pass my schema, student schema, and student sort schema. Again, we are going to need the image. If it's create, we are going to call create student. If not, update student. Why it's not coming? I didn't use export somehow. Okay, I'm gonna save and let's import. Let's change here. Student has been created or updated. I'm gonna change here. We'll have username, email, password, name, surname, phone, address, blood type, birthday. We are gonna have the hidden ID, sex, and instead of subjects, we are gonna show the grades. We can select only one grade, so I'm gonna remove here. I'll say grade ID. And let's destructure our classes and grades. And use them here. For each grade, that includes ID and level, we are going to show the level, and here is going to be grade ID. And let's do the same thing for the classes. Let's actually say grade because we are going to choose only one. And here is going to be class ID. We are going to map through classes. And for each class, that by the way includes ID, name, capacity, and count. And inside we have the students, and I can use them here. And we are going to show class.name. Of course, I should change this name. We cannot use class. And also, we can show here the capacity and empty space. So let's say class item count students. And also, let's show the total number, class item and capacity. And let's say capacity. And I'm going to give here a space, just like that. We are going to have the upload widget. And that's all, I think. Let's see. I'm going to click. As you can see, classes and their capacities. By the way, I can move this here. It looks a little bit ugly. I will cut this. And let's paste it at the beginning. Okay, it looks much better, but we don't have here the parent ID. I'll create one more field. It's going to be parent ID. As I said, if you want to, you can fetch all the parents, but it's not ideal. It's going to be a string, so I can delete here. Okay, let's see our studio. And I'm going to choose parents. Let's get the first one. I'll say test. Any password here. Blood type. Birthday. If you want to, you can give here a limit. Let's choose any class and grade. I'm gonna create. Let's see. And it's here. What about update? Of course, there is no attendance. Let's open up our attendance card. And I will say if it doesn't exist, right here, dash. As you can see, the class is 2A, which has 5 lessons that we can see them here. And again, when I click on this button, by the way, we don't have the button. Let's create. I'll open up the teacher page. Copy this. Open my student page. And after the name, I'm gonna paste. Let's import. It's gonna be student, update, and student. Okay, it's here because we have a div here that contains this h1 tag and our button. Okay, when I click, as you can see, the user is here. I'll say test2, update. Okay, we already have this username, I think. And perfect. Let's update again. As you can see, the username is here. What about delete? Let's come back. Delete this user. And it's gone. This is what we want. And that's all, guys. I think you can do the other forms. I don't want to do exactly the same thing again and again. But we can do one more thing here. If you remember, as a teacher, we can add exams, assignments, and results. Let's log out. And log in as a teacher. Let's open the exams. And right now when we create an exam, the lesson ID of that exam should be our teacher's lesson. Because in our schema, as you can see, it has a lesson ID, but we cannot add here some other teacher's lesson ID. It has to be ours. Let's open up the exams page and change here. Form container, exam update delete, and create. Okay. Let's open up and add our case, exam, and we are going to have a condition here. If we are the admin, we can add any lesson we want, but if we are the teacher, the lessons should be our lessons. So let's add here our role first. Remember how we are doing this. And let's say exam lessons, Prisma lesson, and where condition. Let's remove this, by the way. And I will say if the role equals teacher, the teacher ID of that lesson will be our user ID. If it's not, it means it's the admin, so we don't have any condition. And I will say select. We are just gonna need the ID and the name. Of course, we are sure that our user ID exists. And let's say lessons is gonna be exam lessons. Let's remove this. Open our form model, import our form. Of course, it doesn't exist. Let's create. I'm gonna copy my subject form and paste, let's say, exam form. I'm gonna change the component name. Right now I can import. And also let's update here. Firstly, I will open my actions. Let's close this menu. I will copy here. Actually, it's too long. Let's copy from create, update, and delete subject. Just like that. And I'm gonna paste it here. Delete exam, update exam, and create exam. We are gonna update them later, but for now, let's say delete exam, and let's use this form here. If it's exam, it's gonna be exam form. And right now we can update our form. Of course, we are gonna need our types first. Let's open up form validation. Again, I'm gonna copy here and paste. We are gonna have the ID. Here is gonna be the exam title. Let's, by the way, say exam schema. And we are gonna have a start time. It's gonna be a date. If it doesn't exist, let's say start time is required. And one more is gonna be end time. And one more, and it's gonna be our lesson ID. It will be a number. lesson is required. Okay, let's use this in our form. I can close here and others. It's gonna be exam schema, and here when we create, it's gonna use create exam. If it's update, update exam. Exam has been created or updated. Create a new exam. Update the exam. And let's change our inputs. We'll have the title. And we'll have the dates. Start date is going to be start time field. And the type will be, I'm not going to say date because we should also get the hours and minutes. So it's going to be date, time, and local. Here is going to be end time. And finally, we'll be able to choose lesson. It's going to be a single select. We are going to get the lessons. Here is going to be lesson ID, and I'm going to update them. And we are going to be using lessons array. And for each lesson, we have the ID, which is a number, and the name. Let's remove this. And that's all. Right now, we can update our actions. Here is going to be exam schema. And here can stay as form data. We are going to delete the exam, but we have to be sure that this exam belongs to us. So again, I'm going to get my user ID and role. And I will write here one more condition, and I will say if the role equals teacher, the lesson and its teacher ID will be our user ID. If it's not, it's gonna be empty. And we are sure that it exists. In this case, we are not able to delete any other teacher's exams. This is how you can protect your request. And again, when we create a new exam, firstly, we are going to check if the lesson belongs to us or not. If it doesn't, we are going to return an error. Teacher lesson await prisma.lesson. I'll say find first, where the teacher ID will be the user ID. And also the ID will be data.lesson ID. So right now we are sure that this lesson belongs to us. In this case, we can create a new exam. But before, let's write our condition. If it doesn't exist, we are going to return an error. So I will say Prisma exam create. The title will be data title. Here is going to be start time, end time, and lesson ID. Let's remove this. And again, when we update, we will do exactly the same thing. Of course, we are going to do this if the role equals teacher. Let's do the same thing here. Because if we are an admin, we don't need that. We are not going to run this block. I will say update where the ID will be data.id. Okay. Let's try. I'm going to click here. Test. As you can see, we can choose any date and hour. Just like that. But our lessons are not here because in our schema, as you can see, we don't have our user ID because I used my seat again and it removed my user ID. Let's add quickly. I'm going to change here. Refresh my page. By the way, as you can see, this is our existing exam. Let's say math test. Any date here. And those are our lessons. Let's choose this one and create, and it's here. And when I click here and delete, it's gone. This is how you can protect your requests using roles. I just wanted to show you. So you can do exactly the same thing for the assignments and results. And I'm not gonna do the same thing again and again. That's enough, I think. If you understood what we do here, it will be easier to create the others. It's gonna be exactly the same. Instead of exam ID, you are gonna be using assignment ID. And for events and announcements, we are just gonna have title and class. Just fetch the class data and put it inside your form. That's all. And that's all, I think. We finished our project. So right now we can deploy our application. To do that, we need to make some changes in our application. Otherwise, you are gonna get an error when you build your application. Firstly, I moved my role and user ID to inside my component because when you define them outside the server component, you are gonna get this error. Let me build my application. npm run build. And as you can see, auth function only supported in AppRouter. Of course, this file is inside the AppRouter, but you should define them in the server component, not the outside. So I'm gonna move this here. And since we are using our role inside the column and row, I moved them inside the component also. Just do the same thing for other list components. For your form container, again, it should be inside your container. And I realized I didn't add here the router dependency. Just add this. And for the other forms, again, I forgot to add this router and type. Just add them. Those are just minor mistakes, nothing important. And I realized that I didn't fetch the data in the parent page. Firstly, we are going to get the parent ID, and we are gonna fetch all the students of that parent. And using this list, we are gonna show different big calendar components for each child. And remember, it can be either a teacher ID or class ID. Since we are using this for a student, it's gonna be a class ID, and we are gonna pass here the student. Actually, it should be student.classID. That's all. Let's build again. And there is no problem anymore. Right now I can push my application to a GitHub repository, but before I'm gonna add here my Docker configuration, because when we deploy our application, we should also run our database server. Remember, we are running this Postgres server on the local host. We are gonna do the same thing on the virtual machine, and also we are gonna deploy our Next.js application as we did for this Postgres container. To do that, inside the root folder, I'm gonna create a file, and it's gonna be Docker file. And I'm gonna create one more, and it's gonna be Docker compose. You can give here any version. I'll say 3.8, and I'm gonna write here my services. In our application, we are gonna have two services. The first one will be our database, and the second one will be our Next.js application. So I'm gonna write Postgres, the image name, Postgres 15. As you can see, we are running Postgres latest, which is 15. And let's write the container name. I'll say Postgres DB. And we can write here our environment variables. Remember, when we created our Postgres server, we added our database name, database username, and password. I'm gonna add them here also. Let me just copy and paste. Just like that. Of course, you can change the names, but it can stay like that. And I'm gonna give my port number. Remember, it's running on those numbers. Just like that. If you want to, you can add volumes. I will just copy and paste. By the way, you can find everything in the GitHub repository. You don't have to memorize anything. I'm gonna give here a space. And after that, I can create my second service. This was Postgres, and this is gonna be our Next.js application. Let's say app. I'm gonna give the container name. Let's say Next.js app. The port numbers. Remember, it runs on 3000. I'm gonna pass here the environment, and let's pass our database URL. It's gonna be just like this string, but it should be exactly the same name here. Let's change them. Username, password, and the database name. You can write here whatever you want. And also you can add your other variables, but it can stay like that. And I will say depends on our Postgres service. Because if we don't have the database, we cannot run our application. Let's save here. And inside the Docker file, we are gonna write our steps. Let me actually copy and paste here, and let me explain. Firstly, when we run Docker, it's gonna use Node.js 18. You can change the version, but it's the stable one. And we are saying here, our application works on the app directory, uses package.json, and using this package.json, it's gonna install our dependencies. It's just like running your application on the local server. Remember, we are using npm install and after npm run dev. But this time, we are gonna build our application because we are deploying. But before that, we are gonna run npx prisma generate. So it's gonna deploy our Prisma schema, and our application is gonna run on this server. This is how we are gonna run our Docker container. So let's add it to our GitHub repository. I'll say git init. I'm gonna add everything, but make sure that your env file is inside the git ignore file. As you can see, I'm gonna add everything. Let's commit. It's gonna be on the main branch. I'm gonna add my GitHub repository here, git remote add origin and your repository. And I'm gonna push everything inside this repo. Git push origin main. Oops, push. Okay, right now we can connect to our VPS and clone our project. To do that, I'm gonna open up the Hostinger panel. If you remember, we set up our hosting, and right now we are gonna reach it using this IP address. But before, we should add here our SSH key. So I will come here, add SSH. I'll say llama dev, and here we should generate our SSH key. I'm gonna run this command. It's gonna create my SSH key, and using this command, we are gonna copy that key. And I will pass it here, just like that. As you can see, it's here. I'm gonna add. It's gonna take a while, and after that, we'll be able to connect to our server. Let's clear here. And it's ready. As you can see, we are gonna connect to our VPS server using this command. Just like that. I'll say yes. And as you can see, we are connected. I will clear. Let's see what we have. And right now I'm gonna create my folder. Let's say app. Let's open. And inside, I'm gonna clone my project. Git clone the GitHub repository, and I will say dot. As you can see, everything is here. And also I'm gonna add my .env variables. So I'll say nano.env. Let's come here, copy everything, and paste. And it's ready. And right now we can run our containers. I'll say docker compose up and build. It's gonna take a while, and it's ready. I'm gonna copy our address, and remember our application is running on this port number, and as you can see our application is here. Let's log in, and our homepage is here. We are an admin, but we don't have any data. Let's try to add. I'm gonna add a new subject. I'll say test. And as you can see, it's here. Let's try to update. Perfect. And delete. Okay, it works. So you can add your items, or if you want to, you can use the seed file. And let's also add a teacher. Jane Doe, any password here, name, surname. We can add an address, blood type. Let's give a date. And as you can see, our subject is here. I can select, and let's create. It's here. Okay, it works. And that's all. I hope you liked it. If you learned something new today, please like the video. Don't forget to follow LlamaDev's social media accounts. I hope I'll see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.